Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another week that was. My name is Saeed Khan, and as you just heard from the PSA, vaccination still good. Helped to at least assuage you from some of the more severe symptoms of COVID-19. Not completely out of the woods yet, but we are not really talking about it as much on the show as we were. No Nightline like daily or weekly update, but who knows? Stay tuned anyways, as Nancy then decided at that very moment to give a verbal cue with a cough.
No, I just have a cold. Okay, there's that's going around too. So
there is that. I think there's also a little bit of a stomach bug going on. So, anyways, well, joining us in very good hail and health, fortunately, are from Deadline Detroit, Nancy Derringer.
Hey.
Attorney Steve Fishman, who was, I thought, flashing us something on paper, but he was just reading something.
Right.
AM 910's radio host, Adolph Mongo, and editor-in-chief of Deadline Detroit, Allan Lengel.
In COVID lockdown.
In COVID lockdown. So don't ever make you think that these ads are in vain or unrelated to our show. All right. With that, and it's kind of still apropos the whole notion of Nightline, I feel as though we are getting into that weekly update regarding Ukraine. It seems as though on the one hand, Russia and Russian troops have withdrawn from Kyiv and from most of the north of the country, but they are now concentrating in the east. And it looks like the brutality is intensifying in Kramatorsk. Did I get that one right? I did. Railway station, over 50 killed, over 100 injured civilians who were trying to flee the east and from where the epicenter of the fighting is going. It seems as though it's a futile question to ask how long will this last, but where do you see the war right now?
Well, I see it as they just gonna piecemeal Ukraine until they have it all. It's no question that Putin wanted. He want them back in the fold. It didn't go the way he thought it would be. He thought it would be a week or 6 days or whatever, and it turned out to be longer, a lot of casualties, but they have the firepower, and it's just a matter of time. They take a piece here and a piece there. In a year or two, they have it all.
And then they have to deal with a counterinsurgency, or an insurgency rather, which I think is, I think when you say it's inevitable, I don't think it is inevitable. I mean, he's already pulled back from Kyiv. That's the big prize. I mean, that's the beating heart of Ukraine. If he thinks it's going to be, if he thought it was easy, it would be easy to take this country, he's going to find out it's going to be even worse to try to hold it. I just don't see. I mean,
you remember Nancy? He's from the old KGB,
right?
Who can care about how they treat people? People disappear, killing people, digging mass graves, and all that other stuff. They don't care.
I don't doubt his brutality and what he's capable of, but I mean, we've already seen. I mean, we all saw the pictures from
Bucha.
I don't remember which city it was.
Bucha.
Yeah, Bucha, with these corpses with their hands tied behind their backs, with a bullet in the head. But his army is proving to be, again, let me just trot out the line, Ivan the Terrible Soldier. He's going to have to fight this. If he wants decent fighters, he's going to have to hire mercenaries. I mean, that just doesn't seem to bode well for anything other than a worst possible scenario at some point. I don't know. Chemical weapons, nuclear, who knows?
I think right now, I don't think I agree with Adolph either. I think that the citizenry, they're going to fight to the last person. I don't think that he's going to be able to occupy the whole country. But I think the most important thing right now, and Zelensky has certainly been saying it, and other people have as well, is that the West, and particularly the United States, they got to get them the weapons, and you got to get them to them quick. And we don't need to sit around and debate about it. Get them as many of these anti-tank and these missiles that they need. And The third thing is I read a very interesting column, I wish I could tell you where, about the effect, and all of a sudden some of these body bags are coming back to Russia. There was a sister, I believe, of a deceased army guy, and she was public. I mean, her name was in the newspaper. So, I mean, we know how Putin treats people like that. But I think as more body bags come back, I don't think they're going to overthrow them. I don't think anybody's going to come and do anything to them. But I think the combination of those three things, the determination of the Ukrainians to not give up, the body bags coming back to Russia, and then hopefully if the West continues to supply them with what they need so they can continue to shoot down planes and continue to destroy the tanks and continue to shoot from wherever they're shooting from, they're killing a lot of Russians.
But he still wins because he won an unstable Ukraine. And he got it. That's what he wants. He don't want them to be part of NATO. He don't want them to be part of anything. So he wins regardless.
Well, I think Afghanistan. Look, the Russians went in there and eventually left, as we did the same thing. And as far as NATO, I think Ukraine could agree to something like that, but I don't know that it means that the NATO countries can't help individually support him, even if they're not, all part of a pact. But I agree with Nancy. I don't think it's inevitable that Russia takes over. I think when you have, it's these countries that fight. It's like Israel. Look at Israel, such a small country, but such a determination to have sovereignty and exist. And when your existence is in question, people really, and when people see what's going on in all these cities, the slaughter that's happening, you think they're just going to surrender to these people?
But people stepped up for Israel. They're not stepping up for the Ukraine. They should have no-fly zones and all the other stuff that they can do to the Russians.
We get the U.S. has given Israel arms and stuff like that. We're giving Ukraine arms and stuff like that. I mean, Israel had always more sophisticated equipment, but.
So how much do you think that the nuclear factor is playing a role in this? I mean, the fact that you've got Putin with thousands of nuclear warheads, and there's always this possibility that he pulls out a Bob Dylan CD and says, when you got nothing to lose at a certain point. And that's something that didn't exist in Afghanistan. It hasn't existed within an Israeli context. And it didn't even involve or figure into Chechnya, which I think is the other example that we could probably look at, where Russia was incredibly brutal in the 1990s and leading to Chechnya to finally not only surrender, but now getting Chechnyans to fight on the side of the Russians against the Ukrainians.
Yeah. I think it will be, whatever it is, it's going to end up being a classic Pyrrhic victory. I mean, maybe Adolph's right. Maybe winning in this case consists of a smoking pile of rubble where Ukraine used to be, a permanently embittered population, and but no NATO threat. I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, I'm with Steve. We gotta get him a lot more weaponry yesterday. So.
I was watching the 1983 James Bond movie Octopussy, and in it, hey, come on, man! It's Ramadan. I need some way to kill off the fast.
I've never watched Octopussy on Yom Kippur. I'm going to tell you that. But go right ahead, Saeed. Just go right ahead.
Well, Yom Kippur is only one day, man. This is 30.
You eat every day. What are you talking about? You guys get to eat every evening. Come on.
Okay. So there was the whole point is that there's this maniacal Soviet general who is looking to call the West's bluff, saying that the West is decadent and impotent and that they would never go ahead and even fight if Soviet military moves into Western Europe. And part of it is, of course, based on the nuclear option. I wonder if Putin has spent his pre-Ramadan days watching the movie and getting inspiration from it. But what does this whole campaign say about the West? I think that if we're looking at a report card, we should probably need a progress report just about now in the marking period about how the West has responded and really what's on its mind regarding Ukraine?
I think all in all, it's responded pretty well. I mean, I think it's gone way beyond the unity that's been there. But, I think it's probably a little uneven in terms of some of the arms that have gotten there. They probably should have gotten there sooner. I'm not sure why they didn't just have a big buildup of arms as the Soviets were amassing. And I don't know if they didn't want to intimidate the Soviets. But at this point, there's no such thing as intimidating the Soviets. I mean, and the sad part is that, look, if Russia didn't have nuclear weapons, we'd probably be in there right now, bombing the shit out of them.
Right.
It's interesting just, how few countries have nuclear weapons and the power that they have when they have the nuclear weapons.
Well, that's when we talk about a no-fly zone. I mean, you can call it a no-fly zone, but what it is a declaration of war. It's a shooting war with between two nuclear powers, and being the United States and Russia, and I mean, even Ukrainians aren't going to want that. I mean, they don't. They want to save their country. I don't think they want to be the battleground.
What would happen if Poland sent in some troops into the Ukraine? Would Putin, would he use nuclear weapons?
I don't know.
Suddenly Polish troops go right into the capital.
But they might go right in. Russia might go right into Poland.
And then that might trigger Article 5 of NATO, because Poland is now a
NATO state. You're right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think the question about the West's reaction, I'm taking that question as being, what did Putin think about it when he first did it? I think he probably thought they were weak. He's been able to get away with a lot of stuff. He had a lackey in the White House that was licking his boots, kissing his behind, and Biden's 100 years old, and maybe he figured, well, what the hell? I'll be able to get away with it the same as I did before. With respect to the West response, to me, if I could do anything right now, I'd get the Germans to quit buying their goddamn coal and gas, because they're letting them live. They're giving them a lot of rubles. And I thought at first it sounded like from their leader that they were going to stop doing that. But then you'd be asking the Germans to sacrifice. They have to turn their thermostats down to 65 or something. And if they're anything like the Americans, nobody wants to sacrifice 50 cents of their own.
Right.
I would hope Germans are a little bit more
aware,
tougher maybe, but I think that's where we're at right now. I think we need to cut off everything he can get. And as long as he's getting money from them, we've cut off the banks and this and that and the other. It'd be nice to cut that off as well.
Well, I think along with that, Steve, then we have to look at India. I think former UN ambassador John Negroponte was on CNN saying that he was bewildered that a so-called democratic country, one that is part of a strategic alliance like the Quad with the United States, Australia, and Japan, is openly buying Russian oil. And then, of course, we haven't even talked about China, which is an interesting factor in this. So I'm sure we will revisit this next week as well. But some good news, at least here in the United States. Yesterday, we had the confirmation of Ketanji Brown Jackson. The Senate confirmed with a vote of 53 to 47. I believe President Biden is speaking as we speak in the White House with remarks about welcoming her and swearing her. Well, actually, I think Breyer is still going to be on the court for the rest of the term, but she'll be waiting in the wings. Where do you see this going, short term and long term, with Brown Jackson on the court?
Well, I think one thing the Republicans are already trying to telegraph, if they take over the Senate, that they may try to block any more appointments to the Supreme Court for the rest of the term, which I think is just criminal. But I think
it's the way they roll. They've done it before.
They're so disappointed that a black woman is on the court. It's disgraceful. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I don't know if you saw, she tweeted and said about the 3 Republicans that they're pro-pedophile for voting for her. And then to go a little bit further, she was actually going to be my schmuck, but I'll find another one, where Jimmy Kimmel said, went on the air and said, "Where is Will Smith when you need him?" referring to her. and she went and reported it to the Capitol Police. And so then Jimmy Kimmel, she tweeted saying that she reported that as a threat of violence. And so Jimmy Kimmel tweeted, "Officer, I'd like to report a joke."
Well, Allan, thank you for knocking out my Schmuck and my runner-up Schmuck.
Oh,
I guess he was everybody's schmuck.
This is Go Fish. I mean, no pun intended, Steve. But I'm glad it's been a very fertile week for schmucks because I've got a few left.
Yeah, there's
so that's good. A few more arrows in the quiver.
Let's let Steve, the lawyer, talk about this. I always am interested in what the lawyers think of the.
Well, without having to get into the obviously racist behavior of the, I was going to make all 47 of them my schmucks of the week while we're on the subject of.
Damn, that's another one.
But your question is, what do I think? Well, how will that affect the court? There's two ways to look at it. The simple way is to look at it as, okay, it's still 6-3. And she'll write a lot of dissents, and she'll join in with Sotomayor and Kagan, and you could just write it off as that. These other people are going to be there. Thomas is only he's only like 71. He's younger than I am, and
he's going to be on there 40 years.
Right. So, but if you look at it as the long view, I think number one, you have to look at her elevation as how are young kids looking at that, and if you're a young black female, let's say, you now realize that you can get yourself elevated all the way to become a Supreme Court justice. You have to have a lot of luck. You have to have a lot of hard work, but it's always good
to go to Harvard. Yeah.
Well, no, but look, when Louis Brandeis became Supreme Court justice, I wasn't alive, but I'm sure a lot of Jews looked at each other and said, hey, we can actually get that far, even though we come from Russia or Poland or Czechoslovakia. Right. So that's a second issue. The third thing is, I'm really hoping, that she'll kind of follow in the footsteps of Sotomayor in terms of writing the truth when she writes these dissents and telling the truth about what it is that the majority is doing. Because while it appears to be acceptable to all these white people in this country, at least she can sit there and she can tell the truth about it the same way that Justice Sotomayor does. So I think that getting a second voice, particularly a younger voice, who hopefully Adolph's right, she'll be there for 40 years. I think that's a big deal too. But anybody that thinks this is going to change rulings on voting rights or on guns,
it's not.
It ain't happening,
It's not. I'm glad it took a minute. I was disappointed with Obama because I thought Obama would be the one that would make that appointment, and he didn't. And it took Grandpa to do it. That's what and he did it. And whatever, I got a lot of criticism of Biden, but I'm gonna tell you, Biden has stepped up to the plate, and he has done some things that even these hardcore Democrats refuse to do. And we're at a place now where the Republicans are just running rampant over the Democratic Party and all these red states. They're making all these laws, and they're sitting back and they're not responding to it. So I think yesterday was a historical vote. I watched it, and I saw the nastiness of the Republican Party. Even Tim Scott, who's an African American out of South Carolina, should be ashamed of himself. And I know he's running for re-election and he's going along the party line, but this guy he's an idiot. I don't know how he can live with himself after joining in with the Rand Pauls and others, Ted Cruz's, and you wouldn't treat a dog the way they treated this woman. They disrespected her, and nobody, only a few people came to her defense. This is crazy. Even when the Democrats disagreed with the Republican nominee to the court, they at least asked questions and they was respectful. They wasn't respectful for this woman. It's like they treated her like a thug on the street.
Well, there was some many condescending questions, and one I can't remember which senator it was, but he peppered her with. He said, there are of homicides in the U.S. only 66% are solved. Do you think that should be higher? She's like, yeah, I think if you commit a crime, you should be punished for it. And he goes, rapes. There have been so many rapes and such a percentage. You think there should be a higher percentage of convictions? I mean, it was idiocy. It was just pure idiocy.
I think a lot of the problem, though, is, and I guarantee Adolph's going to agree with me with this. I don't care if she went to Harvard. I don't care about all of her background. She's a black female, and she knows goddamn well what's been going on in this country for 200 years.
Yeah.
The problem is, just like it is in federal court oftentimes when lawyers don't really say what's on their mind, just like it is at the Supreme Court when a justice like Roberts actually asks a female lawyer whether or not, what's the difference between 28 weeks and 15 weeks? And her answer should have been, really, when was the last time you were pregnant, sir? Justice Jackson, should have been able, I wish she had just taken it down to a street level. And when she got those kinds of questions that Adolph's referring to, call them what they are.
Right.
And say so. But she, she's coached and she's got to get on with all of these other people. It's just the way the society is. Republicans can get away with saying whatever they want, saying the most ridiculous things, the most racist things, the most sexist things, talking about abortion, men sitting there doing all their lecturing on abortion. But the Democrats are afraid to tell the truth.
Right.
It is.
Don't you agree, Adolph?
Yeah, and no question. And these midterm elections, it might be a slam dunk for all these crazies. They got so many crazy people. It's like they let them out the mental institutions to run for office.
Can I just make one point, since you guys just keep talking about this? I just want to echo something that Brian Dickerson said on this show like 2 or 3 weeks ago. It would have cost the Republican Party absolutely nothing to just go along with this one. I mean, she wasn't in danger of tipping the balance. She wasn't in, it's a 1-for-1 trade with Stephen Breyer. I mean, all they had to do was be decent, and they could not even stop themselves from being decent.
No.
A lot of people seem to think that the American democracy, the great experiment of American democracy is going to go out in some single event, and maybe it will. I mean, if Trump's reelected in 2024, I mean, that's Katie bar the door. But I mean, I think I think it's dying. I'm feeling very pessimistic today, and I feel like it's dying in these little moments. The elevation of people like Margie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, Josh Hawley, trying to plant this seed that she's soft on pedophilia, which leads to this. I mean, this whole pedophilia thing that's been going on for the last week is simply so fucking appalling. It's not
even accurate.
Of course, it's not accurate. My point is that her sentences are in line with other judges. They are. I mean, it's him and Ted Cruz. I mean, these people are vile, and
not to mention guidelines that have been set by legislatures, and I suppose that if she is lenient, then it might help some of the Republican brethren to not serve as long in case they're in front of her. So there's that. But speaking of crazies and speaking of the Republican Party, we had a little rally last weekend in Macomb County with former President Donald J. Trump visiting some field and getting his base riled up for the upcoming midterm elections. My favorite was someone who was interviewed who claims that Force now has all of the data, hundreds and thousands of files and pages, and somehow the other, that space station or that Space Force is going to reveal the stolen election, which apparently even Trump in a recent election or in a recent interview said, I lost the election, but it was the fault of the Iranians, the Chinese, and the Russians.
Not the Italians, the Vatican? I heard they're involved.
I'm waiting on the Martians to come to save the Republican Party.
So, I mean, what's the takeaway from the rally? Was it effective? Will it change or influence anything in Michigan? How is Trump looking in Michigan?
I hope he continue to go around the country and do this.
I think
it's you know what, he's driving those independents and those last stronghold of real Republicans away from the party. You know, you can see in the retirement of countless Republican representatives, people that made a lot of sense. They could work on bipartisan issues, but with Trump in the House, you not dare even talk to a Democrat or
Fred Upton.
whatever.
You're talking about Fred Upton.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
Tim, go ahead, Nancy.
I think what the upshot of this rally is, I think that Matt DePerno and Christina Caramo are now lead pipe cinches for Attorney General and Secretary of State nominations. And, I never, after 2016, I never ever want to say never. But if I were Dana Nessel, I would much rather face Matt DePerno in the general election than Tom Leonard, who was probably the second one. And as far as Christina Caramo goes, we did this once. Remember Karen Spranger? This is a woman who knows nothing. She's never held public office. She got this endorsement from Trump on the basis of her willing to stand up and say, I saw shenanigans and it's going to stop with me. I mean, this woman, people keep calling her a college professor. She teaches one class at Wayne County Community College, and it's the how to go to college class, how to study, how to organize your notes, that kind of thing. I mean, I don't want to, paint her as some lunatic, but she's so unqualified to do that job. I mean, Jocelyn Benson's got to be pretty happy about that too.
Well, the backstory of Fred Upton. I was a reporter in Kalamazoo when he ran for office, and the person he replaced was his name was Mark Sojander. He was insane. This guy was hearing voices, etc. And we go back to 1980. This guy was a lunatic. And Fred Upton ran and won and brought some stability to that seat. Right there, South Haven, all these little cities, Bangor, Kalamazoo, etc. Mark Sojander was Marjorie Taylor Greene before she was even born. So so now he's leaving, and now you got the crazies running insane asylum, and so.
Go ahead, Steve.
Let me try to answer. I think the question was what the Macomb County rally, et cetera. I think the only thing the Democrats have going for us is Trump. And the fact that he's willing to sacrifice the party, what he did in Georgia, in 2020 is a perfect example. But even now, he's willing just to salve his own ego and to have people cheering and screaming and yelling. He's willing to go around the country, and I agree with Adolph, and offend. It's not just independents. It's just people who are thinking people, who aren't racist, who aren't crazy, who aren't stupid. There's a lot of Republicans. I know a lot of people who vote Republican. But when this guy comes around, they didn't vote for him in 2020. So I think it's all, as is everything with this career criminal, Mr. Trump, it's all about him. He's not thinking about anything other than himself. That's the way I look at it. Right. I think that when he does these things, this business with challenging that governor down in Florida, that's still going on. And everything shows the guy's going to lose, the other idiot that was the Senator Perdue. But I don't think Trump cares about that ultimately. I think he's one of those.
Georgia.
He's just one of those people. And how many people do you meet that are like that are so, it's not even egocentric. They're so narcissistic that they really honestly don't care how it affects their own family, how it affects their friends or supposed party. I don't believe he's a Republican. He was no Republican. He's not. What he is he's a career criminal who looks at whatever's best for him. And that's why he's doing these things. I think Adolph's absolutely right. I hope he keeps coming, and I think Nancy's right. Let him use somebody who doesn't know her ass from a hole in the ground as the Secretary of State nominee. Same thing with this other guy. I'm no fan of Dana Nessel, but Jesus, if I was going to run against anybody, I mean, I'm certainly not voting for the other guy. That's for sure.
I think it's interesting. You know, a lot of the gubernatorial candidates were at the rally, and only Tudor Dixon was the only one who got a shout out from Trump saying, "I heard you're doing amazing." So last night, Chief Craig, who's another candidate, was on
The coward.
and they asked him, "Does it bother you that Trump didn't recognize you at the rally?" No. And wait a minute, do you think it's important that he said something about Tudor Dixon? No. Well, she's way behind in the poll, but it's interesting. Craig is trying to consolidate himself as a really conservative Republican, which I don't know how that's going to play in the city of Detroit. Last night he said he would say the no gay bill should be stricter in Michigan than it is in Florida. He said he's against, critical race theory. He's anti-abortion. We'll see how that plays out. I don't know how that's going to play out in the city of Detroit, where he thinks he can get a chunk of the vote.
Tudor Dixon's going to get his Trump's endorsement, I think, and who knows? I don't think she's going to get the. I don't know if she'll get the nomination. She doesn't have any money, and she's another one of these. But she's an attractive woman who looks good in a jewel-colored sheath dress, and that's the kind of thing that gets the old man's motor running. So it wouldn't surprise me.
So we got Ira Todd asking, I'm optimistic about the future of the Democratic Party, and we should underestimate some of the decent Republicans. They'll vote for a Democrat, or is Ira dreaming?
Or am I dreaming?
Well,
we're alone in the voting booth, aren't we?
First thing we have to tell Commander Todd happy birthday, because his birthday was yesterday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Ira.
So that's the first thing. And no, I don't think he's dreaming. I don't know about the future of the Democratic Party. That's a little bit for a discussion for another time. But we've all basically said, I mean, Adolph said it first, and I think we all agree that we have a good situation here because of Trump. And we hope that there are enough decent Republicans that will vote against his people.
Because if you look at his proteges, you look at Herschel Walker in Georgia, man, I didn't know the guy. He must have played football without a helmet, because this guy is brain damaged. Or do he have a brain?
And he's ahead in the polls, I think, isn't he? Or at least in the.
I want him to be the nominee for the Republican Party.
I agree.
You know, I was in. I had to go down to Ohio last week for a few days, and I briefly observed up close and personal a little more of the Ohio Senate campaign, which is Rob Portman is retiring, and everybody seems to think this is going to be a Republican seat. It will go to Republican, and the people who are running for that seat are they're just appalling. It's J.D. Vance, the hillbilly elegy guy, Josh Mandel, who is the worst. He's awful. I mean, he makes your skin crawl when some other guy, I forget his name, and then some woman who's probably going to be an also ran. The guy whose name I forget, I think it was Gibbs, was doing an appearance the other day, and he said something like, "Diversity, equity, and inclusion are not American values." That was his pull quote from this event. And I was thinking about, as I drive down to Columbus, I pass through Delaware County. Delaware County is a booming exurban county, probably the closest. It's kind of like Livingston, but I would compare it more directly to Oakland County, in that it's a sprawl county just north of Franklin, which is where Columbus is. And it's full of people who have high-tech jobs, advanced degrees, and a lot of them have brown or non-white skin. Okay, these are, it's full of South Asians and Middle Easterners. And, imagine living there, a natural constituency of the Republican Party. You're a high earner, you're family oriented, you like, good schools, all these things. And these are the people who are jockeying to represent you, who talk like this, who say stuff like, we have to close the borders because they got my mama addicted to fentanyl or something. I mean, I don't know what's going through their heads. I mean, it's like, how do you strategize against them?
They had an article, I think it was in the Times yesterday, about Tim Ryan, who's the Democratic guy, and they showed Ryan has all of these things about what his platform is, and his platform has to do with jobs and working people and law, the child care stuff and blah, blah, blah. Then they had a summary, just what you just said, Nance, of each one of these Republican candidates' so-called platform, and there wasn't one word about anything that had to do with everybody's daily life. Critical race theory, abortion. I mean, it was unbelievable. So I guess we'll sit back and we'll find out, huh?
So there was a time when Tim Ryan was being considered for Speaker of the House against Pelosi. Do you think that things would have been better for the Democratic Party if they would have brought in somebody from the Midwest, somebody like him? Yeah, Steve.
Personally, I think it would have been better if a guy like Ryan, who was a great football player, by the way, a great player in the NFL as well. I think it would have been better to do that. And I think I've said this, I think I've banged this drum for the last, after Obama, 15 years I've been banging it. I think Sherrod Brown was a guy that really, if he'd have run for president, he'd have won. Because he's a regular guy. He wins in Ohio where Democrats have no chance. Why? Because he was opposed to NAFTA. He talks a workers' language. That's what the Democrats have forgotten how to do. Why? Because they hang around with rich people. What happened to them? They're always with rich people flying on fancy-ass airplanes and going on yachts. And they never go to Youngstown or places in Ohio and talk like a normal person. So, yes, I believe much as Pelosi has been able to show her grasp of dominating the rules and this and that and the other, I think that it makes it too easy for the Republicans to say, see, the Democrats are the party of the wealthy. They're the party of the coasts, blah, blah, blah. So yes, I
think you need to issue a fatwa that Democrats need to fly on Spirit for one whole year and get back in touch with real Americans. Allan.
You know what? I got so consumed by the Spirit, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, I was going to say, I'm sorry, Nancy Pelosi. I have to say, I thought she did a tremendous job standing up against Donald Trump during those years. I thought she was very skilled. She was in his face, and he was intimidated by her. So, but there's a time for a changing of the guard. But I agree with Steve. I mean, the Democratic Party's got to. It needs.
They got to put some new. They need some new blood, and they don't have it. The Congressional Black Caucus is weak. They got the same, everybody on the same page. And I don't know what page the Democrats are on, because the Republicans have a game plan. And listen, they running their place. They doing it from Texas, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama. It's like they coming north. They got Ohio. They're going to Indiana. They hitting all these states, and the Democrats is standing pat. You got to get some new cards in the game.
I agree with you, but the Democrats just need a lot. I mean, Pete Buttigieg may be their strongest candidate, and I don't know how strong he is as the presidential candidate.
Young people. We've got a group of 80-year-olds. I feel like a youngster when you look at Steny Hoyer, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi. These people are 100.
Bernie Sanders, got to go.
I like Jamie Raskin.
He's old as us, isn't he? I mean, I'm just tired of it. We need young people like Ryan, like Pete, young people that can talk.
And I was and I thought that Joe Biden should have picked anybody. There was about 5 people he could have picked as vice president, and Harris was not on the list who I thought he should have picked as his running mate. She's been invisible. So when the presidential elections comes around the next time, I think we're gonna have 2 new candidates for the Democratic Party.
Yep.
Yeah. I think Harris is not a very strong.
No,
she's not a very strong vice president. If you look at it, really, not many vice presidents get elected. I think George Bush and Nixon eventually, but he ran in '60 and lost. Came back in '68 finally.
Biden.
Humphrey lost. Mondale lost. It's certainly.
Well, you have to look how they lost. Kennedy had the monsters throw the vote machines in Illinois, George Wallace got into the race in '68 and siphoned away a part of the Democratic base. Oh, it's a whole lot of things happen when a vice president don't win. But all I'm saying is right now the Democrats need to be looking for a new leader of the party. I don't care what the grandpa say. He's not running. He can't run.
And
Well,
really, Schumer's not that old. I was going to say Jamie Raskin, who was on the impeachment committee out of Maryland, is a constitutional lawyer at George Washington University, a brilliant guy, a great speaker, but as Jackie Mason would have said, maybe he's too Jewish, but I think he'd be a great candidate.
Well, right now, I mean, you've got the Politburo, all the aging and graying group, and then you've got the young buck progressives. I'm not sure where the center is for the Democratic Party. But on the other hand, you were talking about Steve earlier regarding a few crazies out there like Trump. But what about the fact that Republican establishments are all in with him? I mean, here in Michigan, for example, there's the case of the GOP chair, Ron Weiser, who seems to have done a Jedi mind trick on Tom Leonard and saying, maybe you don't want to run. And Tom saying, yeah, maybe I don't want to run because of the fact that he didn't have Trump's endorsement and that DePerno does. It seems as though there's quite a bit of complicity, even in a state that's not as dug in Republican as Michigan.
How much is he going to pay him? He paid Stan Grote a couple $100,000. I'd ask for at least $350 for that. So
I'd ask for 2 condo buildings in Ann Arbor.
I try not to think of Ron Weiser as the spokesperson for anything. He was a guy who somehow pretended that he was a, quote, victim of Doc Anderson, even though he graduated the school 3 years before the doc came.
Really?
I don't remember him ever playing anything either, just a minor little details, a couple of them. And I don't know if he walked it back, but once I heard that, I just kind of figured this guy needs to just go off into the darkness and leave everybody alone. I mean, I don't even know what to say about that, other than what's obvious to all of us, I suppose. These people who want to stay involved and have positions of power in the Republican Party seem to be people who are going to swallow whatever problems they have with Trump and stick up for him because that's what the base seems to want. Isn't that really the answer? Otherwise, you become Kinzinger or you become Liz Cheney or you become even Romney to a point. I think a lot of these people are weak people, Saeed. They don't have any principles. I mean, we've all known people like that in our life, right? You talk to him about one thing, and the guy says what? Adolph comes and talks to him. The guy says 180 degrees to the opposite. Adolph and I meet at the bar to have a drink, and we bring up the guy, and we say, wait, were we talking to the same guy? That's how these people are. Don't you think
Michonne Maddock is actually who's really running the party these days? And Weiser is just the checkbook, and the Rolodex, because until just a few years ago, Michonne Maddock was the wife of a bail bondsman in, Milford, Michigan, So, I mean, and she'll be that again someday. So. Yeah,
but, like Jerry Springer paying his prostitutes with a personal check.
Right.
That don't bounce. Weiser's still a major force.
Yes, exactly.
So, I mean, is there going to be a day of reckoning? I was reading an article today about Idaho. And it seems as though the crazies in Idaho have really overwhelmed that state's Republican Party. And
Didn't they do that a long time ago? I remember Idaho is like where the white nationalists are going to set up their alternative country, aren't they?
They got the militia. They got the neo-Nazis. They
got the potatoes.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
But they're also voting. And I mean, we're finding that the legislators, I think, only 19 out of like 105 or so in Idaho are Democrats. So it's heavily red. And now it's moving into the crimson or the vermilion shades as far as the depth of that kind of quote unquote Republicanism. So is there the possibility that the so-called moderate Republicans will tack over to the Democratic side, or at least start to make some kind of concessions?
Well, if the Democrats decided to make Roe versus Wade the campaign issue. They need to embrace it like they're doing it in Michigan. We're not going Dana Nessel not going to defend that 1931 law of you can go to jail or whatever for performing an abortion or having one or whatever. The Democrats need to force the Republicans' hand. They're already passing these laws, so they need to embrace it and say, bring it on. So if the Supreme Court says, okay, we overturning Roe versus Wade, great, because I think that's the death bell for the Republican Party as we used to know it. Then you'll see a lot of people flee the Republican Party.
It's the car that the dog caught. Right.
Well, okay, I'm going to go ahead and call an audible here. So, Governor Whitmer has now filed lawsuit to try to preserve the right to abortion here in the state. But let's play this out. Let's say that by the end of the SCOTUS term in June, abortion as we know it and Roe v. Wade is overturned. The process to go ahead and get abortion legalized again, as you know, would be really a constitutional amendment. And that's got to be a Sisyphean ordeal to go ahead and get passed, because it's not just looking at passing in Congress. It's also the state legislatures as well, which are overwhelmingly Republican. What's the Democratic plan on the day after? Is there one?
I couldn't agree more with Adolph. I've been saying the same thing for 30 years. Let them reverse Roe and let the Democrats finally get out there and get off their duffs and start talking tachlis, like we say in Yiddish, talking seriously about exactly what it means. And you bring women and you attack them on that issue. If that doesn't do it, I've thought this for 30 years, literally. If that doesn't get the women to say, fuck these people, I'm voting them out of office. I don't care if I voted Republican since I was 21.
Right.
If it doesn't do it, then I don't know what can do it for the Democrats. But I agree 100. I can't believe I'm agreeing with Adolph so much. We've never agreed on anything.
Now, but the bottom line is the Democrats got us. They got to step up to the plate.
Absolutely.
And and say, bring it on. If you want to get rid of Roe versus Wade, go ahead, do it.
Do you think
we sit here and we see these women in the Republican Party going along with this bullshit that they throw on the table. But I think that this is the one that's is going to implode the party.
Do you, Steve? Do you think that? What do you think of Whitmer's move yesterday?
Say it again?
What do you think of Gretchen Whitmer's move yesterday to essentially file suit to try to overturn the 31 law, the 1931 law?
I haven't read that. When you just said it, that's the first I've heard of it. So I don't want to start giving lawyers comments.
Okay.
I was busy with the sports section. I'm sorry today.
Oh, okay.
I was reading about the Tigers. I can't be. This is your business politics.
Okay, all right. It was a big story yesterday.
Lawyer from Mumford,
This is why it got such crappy traffic on our sites.
So I don't have an opinion.
Okay. All right.
Hey, I read it on your site. So all right, you mentioned the Tigers. Adolph, you mentioned stepping up to the plate. In about 50 minutes, we're going to find some action on Woodward and Adams with opening day here in Detroit. I've lived in New York City. I've lived in Houston. I admit I'm not following baseball as much as I used to. But what the hell is the deal with opening day in Detroit? It is, I mean, I'm not disparaging it, but I've never really been able to fathom the phenomenon that it is, because if there's anything that stops time, it's opening day here. I mean, it's the most incredible thing I've seen. I mean, it's World Cup all in a cup.
5 months of winter, okay? 5 months of winter that and it's this feeling that finally, like, the sun is coming out, so there's that. There's the Ernie Harwell effect and all of that, sentimental jibber jabber that, Mitch Albom has made so much bank on. It's a Detroit thing. There are certain holidays where you want to be in Detroit, and Thanksgiving is one of them because of the parade and the Lions, and opening day is another one. It's a Detroit thing. I mean, and I've only lived here for 18 years.
It's
So
Don't forget the fireworks.
So
and the
this is
fireworks.
Nancy. This is our Rumspringa.
Exactly.
It's a celebration of spring.
For everyone.
It's a celebration of spring. I thought they used to go ahead and have that funeral for winter. I thought that was the cool thing for us goths. Steve.
Just so you know, Nance hasn't been here a long time. I've been here for 73 years. I can tell you this is not a recent phenomenon. My buddy and I, in junior high, we used to skip school. We'd get on the Hamilton bus. We'd take the bus downtown. His dad would get us tickets and we'd go and this is 1960, 61, 62. So the difference now is, of course, social media and the fact that you have 11 bars downtown, so people can come and start at 10 o'clock in the morning and get completely shit-faced and turn everything into a party. In the old days, you actually went to the baseball game at Briggs Stadium on Trumbull, and Grand River. But I just think I agree with you guys. It's an event in the city of Detroit, and people just enjoy doing it.
And most years, this is the highlight of the season.
Yeah,
because they don't go anywhere except a few times a decade.
So
they'll have a good team this year, I think.
Well, if everybody stays healthy, like in every other sport.
Right.
Yeah. See, I grew up in Lapeer, and the two big days were Tiger opening day and opening day for hunting season, November 15th.
Yeah.
So, real traditions, I guess, beginning the spring and then ending the summer with it. But no, I think it's fantastic. I think the idea that we have this tradition where the governor comes out and throws the opening pitch, and it is such a big deal, and the Tigers are not in last place. If they start the season.
And you like to see them boo the governor or the mayor or whatever, and see who can throw a ball, who can't throw the ball to home plate. Oh, as a kid, the safety patrol used to take us. AAA used to take all the safety patrol boys to the game. We sit out in the bleachers.
Bell's used to put Oberon out. That was traditionally on opening day. So that's like my favorite beer. So there you go.
A few years ago, we had a group of students, college-age students from the Middle East, come in on a State Department cohort to Wayne State. And one of the things we did was we took them to a Tiger game. 3 hours in, still couldn't explain to any level of comprehension the game of baseball to them, because when a bat and ball sport is not part of the anthropology of a region, soccer, no problem, but explaining, and then I think unfortunately the infield fly rule had to be invoked in that game, which really set it into a maelstrom.
Well, soccer is no problem because the score almost all the time is 0-0. Even a dumbass like me can walk through the living room or something and somebody's wild. Let me take a wild guess. What's the score? 0-0.
0-0.
Yeah, daughter-in-law.
But there's rules that keep it at 0-0, Steve. You have to understand those.
But to watch a game like cricket, you can watch it for a week, the same game. So
5 days, man. 5 days.
Yeah.
Allan.
I was going to say that baseball is actually really a lot more complicated than you think. I watched baseball with my parents one day at home, and they're from Europe, and they knew nothing about baseball. They didn't care about baseball. And I started having to explain, okay, that guy on first base, he can run, but if it's a fly ball, he has to wait, and you realize all the little nuances of the game, that it was really a lot more complicated than I realized.
Absolutely. By the way, another audible here. Tiger at the Masters. How's he looking? What's going to happen?
Who cares? The most boring game in the world. I'm
going to tell you this. When Tiger Woods came back from his original injury and he won the Masters, I'm not one. I don't really watch much golf. It's not because I don't like golf. I just get bored watching 5 million white guys all swinging the same. I rooted for him. And then, unfortunately, he decided to go to the White House and accept the Presidential Medal of Honor, was it, from Trump? And he said to that asshole, and he smiled and grinned. And I said, that's it. I hope he finishes last in every other tournament he plays in. Just as an aside, he hasn't won shit since, and he almost killed himself in that car accident. So maybe the Lord was looking at him the same way that I was when he was standing next to the number one asshole on the
I think
planet.
he's not going to do that well.
Let's say on the internet,
Having had my quadricep tendon torn, and his was, I think, even more severe, although he's in much better shape than I am. I don't think he's going to do that well.
Screw Tiger Woods. I could care less about Tiger Woods.
The internet has an abbreviation, ETTD. Everything Trump touches dies. So there you go.
Well, they got that from Rocky IV. Everything he hits, he destroys. Okay. Well, with that, we are now moving into our favorite phase of the show.
All right.
You're Schmuck. I'm thunderstruck by your arrogance and your idiocy. It really is no mystery. It's true, and you know it. You're Schmuck.
A new intro. Wow.
Says we
You're really getting this
around here.
Directing thing going on.
Well, who wants to start anew with a new thing? Go ahead, Steve.
I will go. I usually like to go later, but I'm going to go because, as we said, there were a lot of candidates, and I don't want to get trapped up with three people saying mine. So as I said earlier, I was going to make the 47 Republicans who voted against Justice Jackson, but yet again, Mitch McConnell overcame everybody. Yes. I happened to have on looking at something this morning, and Mitch McConnell sat for an interview with Axios, and it's a guy who's a really good interviewer.
Jonathan Swan.
Yeah, is he Scottish or British or what else?
He's Australian. Yeah.
Australian. Yes. And he asked him, Senator, I just want to know, do you have, he quoted from what he said about the January 6th thing when he dogged Trump out. Then he quoted from what he said in February, that if Trump is the nominee in 24, he's going to support him. And he asked him if he had a moral red line. And Mitch McConnell, for 3 minutes, it was 3 minutes, danced and swayed and did everything he could, basically winding up saying that there was no such thing. What are you talking about, a moral red line? So that elevates him to Schmuck of the Week for me. He even gets ahead of Ted Cruz and Hawley and all those other guys. He has no moral red line. And he's been a senator for how many years? That's a great thing for us to all know, that there's no moral red line for a guy who's might be the next majority leader again in the Senate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Horrible.
Where do we go next? Allan.
Oh, yeah, go, Nancy. You can go.
Nancy.
Okay.
I defer.
I'm going with co-schmucks, 2 United States senators, but I think I'm going to give it to the most well-known one, which would be Lindsey Graham, who came or voted against Ketanji Brown Jackson for Supreme Court, but did it from the cloakroom. They showed up. Apparently, there's a fairly strict dress code for men on the Senate. You have to be wearing a tie. And Lindsey Graham, Ron Paul, and Jerry, somebody from Nebraska, showed up in civvies. I think he was wearing a quarter zip and a blazer over it, and then basically just stuck their head out of the cloakroom to give the thumbs up or down. And that was it. And they couldn't, even Ted Cruz, the living embodiment of schmuckitude, was able to tie a knot in his tie and show up and vote in person. They voted from the cloakroom. It was a sign of yet another sign of disrespect that's been heaped onto this woman. And I hope she outlives every one of them. And I hope every decision she makes is a rebuke to them. So that's mine.
All right, Allan.
Well, I was going to go with Lindsey Graham because the guy is just proved to be a schmuck time and time again. But I'll go with Ted Cruz. Although it was so golden to see Ted Cruz at the end when everybody started clapping in the Senate chambers and Romney was standing there. He was right near Romney, and he just had this look of defeat and disgust, and he just walked away. I mean, guys, Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, I mean, they're the most shameful. And they're all, I mean, Mitch McConnell. There's no moral compass with any of them.
Yep.
All right. Adolph.
I got twin schmucks. Clarence and Jeannie Thomas.
Ooh, that's a good one.
The new Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy act. with Clarence sitting on the lap of his wife. He's a new dummy. She's doing all the voting, and she's the voice behind him and her. It's unbelievable that the power this woman has. You have never, all the Supreme Court justices, how many times do you get to know their spouses?
No,
Hardly
not
any.
often. No.
But Jeannie, I call her, she has her a puppet, and it's in the form of her husband, Clarence Thomas. Yeah, they real schmucks.
Yep.
That's wow. You know what? You're right. I can't think of a single Supreme Court justice spouse. I mean, the closest I can come is Squee for Kavanaugh. But
no, the Marty Ginsburg, I think was his name.
Yeah. Okay.
But only because they made a movie of her life, and we learned about Marty.
But he was a great lawyer, though.
He was a tax lawyer. Yeah.
And a great lawyer, and he stepped down from the practice as soon as she got on the.
Yep, because he believes in
conflict.
Ethics.
Yes,
exactly.
Okay. Well, since a lot of the schmucks have already been chosen, which is great, means that I'm kind of on the same wavelength as everybody else. I'm going to go on the state level. Tennessee House Representative Republican Tom Leatherwood introduced a bill to preserve and redefine marriage away from same-sex marriage, but with no age limits, which then allows for child marriage, because apparently that's A, not a problem in Tennessee, and B, might actually be something sought. So the idea that the Republicans are looking to twist and make Procrustean the bed just to go ahead and pass anti-gay legislation means that the circuit breakers are off when it comes to age and probably even age of consent, which means that all of those criticisms of Ketanya Brown Jackson being pro-pedo along with the three Republicans is completely superfluous now.
Another great internet thing that comes up over and over again. Everything is projection with these guys. So
that means Honey Boo Boo can get married now.
Yeah, Honey Boo Boo.
It means Jerry Lee Lewis wouldn't have been.
Honey Boo Boo is probably legally able to get married.
12-year-old,
well, given the fact that Keeping Up with the Kardashians and now Shazam Sunset are also being canceled, to have a resurrection of some reality shows. So that's something to look forward to, Adolph. Well, listen, thank you again for being on the week that was. Adolph Mongo, Nancy Derringer, Steve Fishman, and Allan Lengel.
Drive home safely.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.